700 nautical miles on our new Cummins engines, and you had some great questions after Sunday's video. Do we have the same fuel burn as a Nordic Tug, and why is our diesel red? Some of you asked why we don't use Baldwin filters, others wondered why we didn't install a catch tank and breather, and more than a few asked about our funnel, or lack of one. One of you even sent a super thanks to buy one, so thanks for that. And then there's the big question. Are our engines actually junk? Let's get into it.
We're Blaine and Janice, and this is Tangaroa, our 1969 78-foot aluminum yacht we found abandoned in Alaska. So far we've ripped out the old Detroit diesels, rebuilt and marinized a pair of Cummins truck engines, and tackled wiring, grinding, and fabricating from bow to stern. But we're just getting started. There's so much more to come. We've got big plans for Tangaroa, and the goal isn't just to live aboard, it's to take her across the Pacific to Japan by way of Alaska. If you're into boat work, engine rebuilds, and making old things new, subscribe and join us on our never-ending sea trial. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's question and answer. As you can see, we got a few more 100 kilometers back on the new, or nautical miles on the new engines, and things are going fairly well. Got a few more tweaks done on the tuning, got things working much better now. Did have a little bit of an issue with the transmission solenoid, and that was my bad. I knew that there was some rust on those connectors. Was hoping they'd be fine for now, but obviously they were not. Since then, all of those connectors have been replaced, and the solenoids had already been replaced, so no more rust on anything. Shouldn't have that problem ever again. So yeah, things are working pretty well now, and I've been really happy with it. So, gonna go ahead and get into the questions here. Put my glasses on because I can't see anything. And then you guys will notice I'm still in Victoria. And a bit of a funny story on that one. I missed my flight. Had nothing to do with me sleeping in. I just thought my flight was later than it actually was. Showed up at the airport, was going through security. When I scanned my boarding pass, they said, "Oh, your flight's already left." And I said, "What are you talking about? My flight's already left. It's not supposed to leave for another hour." Yeah, not so much. Fortunately, thank you, Air Canada. They got me on a flight for tomorrow with no charge. So super impressed with that. And very good customer service, especially seeing as it was my fault. So yeah, let's get to the questions. First one up from Rolomatics 5009. Those engines are junk to protect your life at sea, dude. And then you removed the grid heaters and didn't replace them with upgraded intake heaters. Why didn't you just get the proper Gardner 6LXB engines or even a Perkins? I think you're majorly going to regret not getting a set of proper marine engines with marine cylinder blowout valves. Just one shutdown in the fog and rain could have you with a bent rod limping home on one engine or stranded altogether. Most would at least use engines with glow plugs where you can pull out the glow plugs and insert blowout valves. The engines will start fine with the hot air box blower and the intake that you run off the oxygen set. Where do I start? So I don't know what you mean about proper marine engines, but as far as I'm concerned, there are no pleasure duty engines in this displacement range that come with blowout valve, blow down valves. That is not a common thing in this displacement range. And seeing as the original engines had 50 plus years on them and did not have those valves, nor did they have grid heaters or glow plugs, I think we're going to be just fine. The grid heater in these engines is known to be a problem, so that's one of the reasons why it was removed, namely one of the bolts in the grid heater, and I could have replaced it with a proper glow plug, but to be honest, they don't need it. Since I've done more tuning on the startup, they start up just fine, even in the cold. I've had these starting in sub-zero temperatures, mind you, minorly sub-zero, but sub-zero temperatures, and there is no extended cranking on them. They fire just as well in the wintertime as they do in the summertime. Very little, if any, smoke, even in the wintertime. So it's not necessary. The new engines are efficient enough on the burn and run high enough rail pressure that they start just fine in the cold. And I've got the specific starters that I used on these engines. I went with an oversized starter. So basically, what it helps me do is make sure that these engines turn over very fast. So that means my compression is higher when I'm starting because I'm not the bleed off on the pistons is not making as much of an effect on it because the pistons are moving a lot faster. It just works better. And like I said, zero issues starting. And like I said, no regrets. I've been really happy with them, and I can't see having any of the issues with condensation in the cylinders that you mentioned. And like I said, there are very few, if any, modern engines of this displacement that have those features anyway. Maybe on bigger commercial engines, but not so much on the new marine engines for this type of boat. So, yeah, that's it. Okay, next question we've got from Tomwood6989. After going over 2400 RPM, will you be increasing pitch or size on the propellers? And this question was asked a couple of times in here. No, I won't, because I know from my fuel burn on at my typical cruise speeds and other speeds that I'm about where I want to be below the prop curve. So the engines are running in a favorably underloaded condition rather than close to or overloaded. The exceeding RPM isn't a problem. That's actually a good thing. That just means that it can and that they're not overloaded. They're still limited. They're not going to over rev or anything like that. And I could put more pitch in, but really it's pointless because I can still reach my hull speed with what I've got now, and I just have more torque available at the shaft with the propellers that I have now. I'm not trying to turn a big, heavier propeller. I say I have more torque. I'm using less torque at the shaft to turn these propellers. So yeah, it's not an issue, and I'll definitely keep it the way it is because that gives me leeway for if we end up getting like a really dirty bottom at some point, or we're running heavily loaded. It just gives me some leeway on my prop curve to make sure that I'm not overloading the engines. So nope, no changes on the prop pitch. I'm actually really happy with where they're at. We've got a comment here from Bunky06171. Hat tip to your epic project. Thank you. Have you ever worked with Permatex #2 aviation seal? My grandfather was MOMM2 during World War II, and he swore by it for decades. Brushable thick liquid, does not harden, and I've used it for years. May help keep your non-gasket surfaces sealed and dry. Janice, continue to provide the organized and subtle chaos and joy. Life is too short to be dull. Cheers from Central Iowa. Cheers. I actually have heard of the aviation formagasket. I'm actually I've brought this up in the past, but I'm trained as an airframe and power plant technician myself, and I remembered specifically in school using this stuff. We used that. Sometimes we used Hylamar, I believe, was another one. And the only thing about it that I found with the Permatex #2 is it's not as thick as some of the like the Right Stuff gasket maker and stuff like that. And I think for when you're using it by itself, it's great for fairly good machine surfaces where they're fairly flat and smooth. But I don't think it's quite as good for like oil pans where you may have a bend in it or you've got a groove or whatever. At least, and this is totally my opinion. I might be wrong on this. Whereas the other gasket makers are thicker and they fill those voids better. And I find that one of the biggest issues that I've had with the Right Stuff in the past, the Right Stuff is the stuff that I use, it's the specific sealant, is you have to get it laid down and on fairly quickly. It's still got to be super sticky and wet. So what I try to do now is just get it on there and get it onto the motor as quickly as possible. And that seems to have worked a lot better. Matter of fact, I was just using it on a car yesterday to reseal a timing cover. So since then, it seems to work pretty well. But yeah, I do know the Permatex too. I'm not sure if it was the ideal stuff for this circumstance, maybe, but the Right Stuff works pretty well too, provided you get it on there quickly. Okay, next up, we've got a great question and comment from Clive Williams, 3661. Rather than replace the oil breather periodically, why not install a catch tank and breather? This will have a number of advantages. Number one, crankcase pressure will be consistent through service cycles. The crankcase pressure will increase during the service cycle with the filter installation. Two, any condensed oil can be returned to the engine. Three, once you have installed the catch tank, there are no further costs or tracking down special filters in remote locations. Cummins would have the oil breather filter to achieve the automotive emission standards, which are not applicable on the boat, as well as simplifying the service maintenance on a truck. Yes, absolutely to all of those comments. Matter of fact, that is my intention, is to build, because in the automotive stuff that I've done in the past, I usually build my own tanks. I can build them a little bit bigger so they have better capacity. Typically can chamber them where they just work better. One of the main reasons why I haven't done it yet is because these crankcase, the valve covers, the valve covers or rocker box covers, are designed to use that filter. And if that filter isn't in place, they don't seal up properly around where all the ports come out. So it would take a little bit of doing to make that work. There are aftermarket covers that I can get for this that would work quite well, but they're all like billet aluminum, super fancy, and just not really ideal for what I'm after for spending that kind of money. Maybe I will at some point. I don't know, but that would be the only way that I'd be able to really go. I could maybe put some sort of a screw-on breather setup onto the plastic covers, but just not really interested in doing that. So for now, I'm just using the filters because it's easy. And if I can find something that's cost effective later, I'll probably switch to it. But so far, so good. And we'll just make sure we have a breather handy. I think somebody had commented on another comment that I believe it was 67,000 kilometers in the trucks is what those got replaced at. So I can roughly figure out what that comes up to for average hours and kind of work that into a maintenance schedule. But even at that 67,000 kilometers in a truck, hours wise, that's going to be a pretty long time in a boat as well. So maybe eventually I'll do that, but for now, we'll stick with the filters. Got a funny one here from, just funny the name, Inherently Broken. Are the hinge pins going to fall out of your ECU enclosure? Timestamp 33 minutes. The hinge pins are actually pretty good. They're pressed in, they don't fall out. But what I did find out, and you can see in that video, is the two bolts that hold the hinge on vibrated loose and fell out. So I'm going to have to address that maybe with some nylocks or just make sure that they were tight. Maybe they just weren't tight from the factory. But no, the hinge pins I'm not worried about. But yeah, the bolts may be an issue. Okay, next up from DR650 Tim. Any reason for going with Baldwin filters? My dealer sells the factory Cummins oil filters for $11.98 Canadian. All the other filters are getting ridiculously expensive though. My main reason for that is, for starters, availability of the Cummins filters. There's not, like the Fleet Guard ones are, I think, the typical, the Cummins ones. And they're not really super readily available here in Victoria. Not only that, with my business and my discounting with local suppliers, I get pretty good discounting on the Baldwin filters, and they're still a pretty good filter. There are a few things with the Fleet Guard filters. I do keep some. I keep all my fuel filters are Fleet Guard, and I usually order those in. But they do offer it's a oil filter with an internal bypass filter. So it's kind of like what I've got set up for my my AMSOIL bypass filtration. It's just all built into the filter itself, so I don't have to have a second filter for that. And I might start using those in the future. I think there's another brand somebody else was telling me that makes the same kind of thing that would fit on that too. Which I just like that idea. It just saves me from having an extra filter type on the boat. So I might switch to that in the future. But for now, the Baldwin filters work great. They're a good filter. And somebody else had commented they thought it was a Fram filter. No, I don't use Fram filters on any of my engines. Typically, it's either Wix or Baldwin, depending on what I need and for what engine that I'm working on. But for these, Baldwin, for me, way to go. Okay, so next up is a question from High Temper 79. Don't you guys have a funnel to put oil in the engine? We may. Where in particular it might have been, I'm not sure, or if it got left at the shop. And the reason why I'm laughing is let me pop back onto my phone because I gotta find the comment. Somebody actually, this was from Philtersian 9162. He sent us a super thanks and donated $5 and said buy an oil funnel. So yeah, I found that really funny. But thank you for the question, and thank you, Philtersian, for the oil funnel. I will definitely get one. Yeah. So I've got this question before, but a couple people asked in this video. Bob in 3V3C asked, can you explain the red diesel? And Rod Williams 2782 Why does the fuel look red? Here in British Columbia, where we fueled up with that, they run dye in the fuel, and basically it's a tax thing, and it's pretty much just there so somebody can't get marine fuel and go put it into a car and or truck and use it. There's you don't pay as many taxes or any taxes on the marine side of things, or less taxes. You don't pay the road tax on the marine diesel. So that's it. It's a colored fuel. So if they dip the tank, they can see if you've been bad. And I have noticed we did fill up in Port Hardy, not fill up. We took on 500 gallons in Port Hardy, and it is not dyed. And it always kind of freaks me out a little bit every time that happens, because I'm used to seeing the red dyed fuel. And when I see non-dyed fuel in my filters, I start panicking whether or not they gave us gasoline or something instead. Even though I know they didn't, it's just a little bit nerve-wracking. So yeah, it's as simple as that. It's just for regulation on the fuel. Okay, we got a question from Ziggy1989. Why a mix of Celsius and Fahrenheit on the gauges on your laptops? I added the gauges and laptops because he didn't put that in there. He put an actual link to a YouTube video showing that. Plain and simple, I just don't have the gauge displays fully set up yet. These ECUs inherently display in, or natively display in Celsius, because Baldur is in Iceland. I just am more familiar with Fahrenheit, so it's quicker for me to look and see what's going on with something in Fahrenheit. So what I have to do anytime I want to view something in Fahrenheit, I have to go in and create a specific math channel in the ECU for that. And basically the long and the short of it is I just haven't created one for, in this particular case, I believe EGT was the one that was in Celsius, and everything else is in Fahrenheit. I did actually go back and do that, and then I forgot to save the file, and when I loaded it back up again, it was gone, and I haven't gone back in there and redone it again. So it's a little bit, that part sucks a little bit, but it's as simple as that. I just haven't got in there to make a Fahrenheit value for that yet that I can monitor. All right, everybody, it's time for the question comment. This week's comment of the day, or the comment of the week. And this one is, I found it really interesting because it gives me a comparison of where I am versus a very similar setup. So this particular comment was from Howard Rowland 6371. It was interesting to see the engine gauges while cruising. I also typically cruise at 1500 RPM, and it gives me about 8 knots on my Nordic Tug 37. Interesting that your fuel burn was about 2.4 gallons per hour. Mine is 2.5 gallons per hour at 1500 RPM. Very close. Must be loaded at the same at this RPM. My engine is a single QSB 5.9, 380 horsepower. Maximum RPM is 3000 compared to your 2400. So yeah, that's actually really interesting because it gives a really good comparison to me for my setup. And I can't remember the exact number on the Nordic Tugs and the 37s, but they're well below half the weight of Tangaroa, and in this particular case, half the length. So he's running a single engine and a 5.9 liter, burning very similar to each one of my engines at 2 engines. So yeah, so in that gives me a little bit of comfort in knowing that even boats that are coming as production boats running a very similar engine are right around the same fuel burn characteristics. That means that I've kind of nailed it for that side of things. So yeah, really interesting to see. Obviously my total fuel burn is higher because I'm running 2 engines, but as far as what the engines are being loaded, we're kind of right in that sweet spot, which is perfect. Yeah, so that's it. Thanks so much for watching the Q&A this week, guys. If you have any interest in watching the boat underway or seeing more of the adventure side of things, check out www.onboard Tangaroa. It's got live tracking for the boat. It shows our other channel, which is Exploring the World on board Tangaroa. But yeah, check it out, and we will see you guys next week.
Subscribe if you haven't already. We're working toward our first YouTube button, and the plan is to take it with us across the North Pacific. And if you'd like early ad-free videos and direct access to us on Discord, you can join our online crew.